About a month ago, I started winning Tier 2 events with Runick Chimera. I won 2 regionals and 2 OTS championships. A lot of people showed interest in the deck list, but I opted to keep it secret for YCS Dortmund. And now that Dortmund is over, I'm excited to show you all the spice. So, with no further ado, enjoy! So we have 3 Sword Knight, which is the Monster Negate and the Lone Fire Blossom of the deck. We have only 1 copy of Cornfield. This is a pretty common card to play 3 of in Branded Chimera, and most people who have tried this deck play 3 of it too, but I think it's best to play only 1 or 2 of it in this deck. The reason being is that in this deck, Big Wing Birthmate goes from being a bit of a brick to being a starter card. Because you can use any Runick spell to summon Hugin, get your Fountain from Hugin, and then tribute Hugin for Birthmate, which then gets you both the Gazelle and the Chimera Fusion. I was on the fence between the 3rd Gazelle and 2nd Cornfield, but the 3rd Gazelle was a lot more important in the grind game, and because we're playing a Runick deck, the grind game is where we're trying to be. I played 2 copies in both the 1st and 2nd build that I used for regionals, but in this 3rd build, the reason why I play only for 1 copy of Cornfield is because we have another way to access the Chimera engine, which is Branded Fusion. So normally the sub-engine that people play in this deck is Patchwork with Edgement Chain, and while I don't think that the Patchwork engine is bad, I do not think it is optimal to play in this deck at all. Summoning Magnum and Guardian Chimera more is very nice, but ultimately the engine just takes up too many main deck slots. Most of the time if I'm seeing a Patchwork, Chain or Poly in my hand, I'd much rather it be a Branded Fusion or a Talons, and on top of that, the engine leans into Droll pretty hard. And then the other sub-package that we are playing is we are playing 2 Shufflers. So I played 1 Shuffler for the Southampton regionals, and it performed really well. I then took it out for the OTS championships, and then for YCS Dortmund, I put 2 Shufflers in for the first time. I'm not playing any Kelbeck or Aggie though. I'm playing only Shufflers, and the reason for this is because I expected there to be a lot of T-Element, which I was. There was a lot of T-Element, and these cards are very good into T-Element. So overall, these were really good, and given how well T-Element performed at Dortmund, I would definitely play these cards again. And then one tech card that I've played in all these builds is 3 copies of Talents. What makes this card so insane in this build, less so than others because we are playing Shufflers, is that almost every card when you draw 2 is going to advance your game state, because it's either going to be part of a Chimera engine, a Runick card, or maybe even Branded Fusion, so drawing 2 is so broken with this card in this deck. If they hand trap you when you already have playable and you don't need to draw 2, it's so insane because you just get to hand rip them again, and you get to hand rip them a 3rd time with the Chimera, which just ends up being so crazy because they then start their turn with only 3 cards and they're trying to break your board with like 5 interruptions, which is, of course, unwinnable. When my opponent has let me resolve both the Chimera engine and the Runick engine, I have never lost a single game going first. This deck is insanely strong at going first. And then onto the Runick part of the deck, we have 2 Fountain, 3 Tip, 3 Freezing Curses, 3 Destruction, and 3 Flashing Fire. It took me a while to recognize the differences in these cards because they look so similar. 3 Slumber, because it's one of the best ones to have going first. Because if your EMZ is full, then you cannot use these ones, so you need Slumber to trigger Fountain sometimes. Another cool thing with this deck is that you can tribute the Hugin in the EMZ to summon Birthmate, which is already really good, but it also clears your EMZ to do another Runick spell like one of these, and then trigger Fountain to draw 3. Then we have 2 Dispelling and 1 Smiting Storm. Not playing Droplet because Droplet is bad because it gives your opponent cards. A Smiting Storm is pretty funny in this deck because you already hand rip them and you hand rip them some more. A Smiting Storm, of course, is worse than Dispelling, but it's nice to have your option to search it in a grind game where you do go for deck out. It's mainly because you would rather draw 1 Dispelling, 1 Smiting Storm than draw 2 Dispelling, so decreasing the odds of that. by playing a Smiting Storm, I think is definitely very nice. Onto the extra deck, we have 2 Hugin and 2 Jerry. I do not play the level 9 one, I played it for the Dudley regional. It was pretty nice because I could go draw standby main battle phase and like have a Runick monster that actually has attack points. But the extra deck is a little bit tight in this, so it didn't really feel worth it. I'm not against playing it, I think it is very cool. I just wouldn't recommend it personally because there are better things to play in the extra deck. The reason why playing 2 Jerry I think is important is because you need to play a rank 4 in this deck because it is too good not to. For the Southampton regional, I played 3 rank 4s to really kind of experiment with how good they were, and they were really strong. I played Baguska, Dweller, and Digusto Emerald. Emerald was actually surprisingly really strong, because once you run out of gas, you just put it all back and draw a card, and then you're not losing a grind game ever. This deck never loses a grind game normally, but with cards like Emerald and Shufflers, you are like never ever losing a grind game. It's crazy. But yeah, playing rank 4 is definitely worth it, because aside from branded fusion, you actually only get fusion locked by Baphomet, and even Baphomet is for the rest of the turn. So you can use Jerry plus either a Sword Knight or Cornfield, revived via Baphomet's Grave effects, or Jerry plus Gazelle to make a rank 4. And then going further into the extra deck, we play Muckracker. This card is really, really strong. I'm very glad that I played it. However, in this deck, it does compete for a slot with Stapelia, and until the Friday, I was playing Stapelia instead, and I did lose a game because I didn't have Stapelia. Both are really good. If you are not playing the branded engine, you definitely should be playing both this and Stapelia, I think, because they both are really helpful. To explain them both, the reason why this is good is because once you run out of Baphomet, you can bring back Baphomet from grave. It lets you do something with Hugin plus Baphomet after they like double hand trap you and you have to pass, and then you Runick them and then they pass back, but then you're still stuck with Hugin and Baphomet, so you need to have something to link off into. This does Fiend lock you, which is fine, because you go into Magnum, which is actually the most beautiful card ever. This card's incredible. And it being Fiend means you can not only revive it with the Chimera Fusion monster, but you can bring it back with Muckracker as well. One cool interaction that a lot of people are not aware of is that Muckracker and the Chimera Fusion monster can also bring back Baguska, which is why rank 4s are so important, because you can make Baguska, they end up clearing this with like Azalea or something, and then it gets to later in the game and you can reborn Baguska with one of these, which is insane. Baguska will then die, of course, in your standby phase, but then it just bought you an entire turn, which is really, really good. And when you have Muckracker on board, you can just reborn Baguska every single turn. And I only played 2 copies of the Chimera Fusion monster, because yes, it does go to a grind game sometimes when a third will come up, but more often than not, if you just manage your resources correctly, you do not need a third one. One thing that I often do is when I have my full setup, I will never use a reborn effect unless I really need to, because by keeping it in grave, I get to keep on adding back the Chimera Fusion every turn, so I don't need to make another one. Then we play 2 copies of Guardian Chimera. 2 comes up because you summon one on your turn going second, and then on their turn you summon another one. But I do think that I would maybe cut one of these for the Stapelia, because Stapelia makes it so that you can dodge impermanence with Sword Knight plus Chimera Fusion plus a Runick spell, because you go normal Sword Knight, tag out Chain Runick spell to summon Hugin, then Sword Knight summons Baphomet and you go Chaining 1 Hugin, Chaining 2 Baphomet, and then when they go to Imperm you can chain Chimera Fusion to make Stapelia with those 2. The other time that Stapelia is good is when they go end of main phase, when you have your full board, and you go Chimera Fusion into Stapelia, which gets the Rimbrum engraved if you have that, or worst case scenario, it means that you can take the evenly match hit, and then still be able to keep the Fountain and have the Chimera Fusion monster, the level 6 guy, in the graveyard still. You don't need Stapelia to play around evenly though, because you can just go into Magnum using an extra card and then chain to pop your own fusion monster in response to evenly matched. And then for the last spots in the extra deck, we have the branded engine of Albion, Rinbrum, Lubellion, and Mirror Jade. So you only need these four. Rinbrum is what you summon when you don't have a Chimera card, because you send Gazelle and Albaz, and then search for Sword Knight or Cornfield, depending on how much you want to respect draw. And then Mirror Jade, of course, is really good. You either go straight into this by going Branded Fusion with Hugin and Albaz normally, or you make it by just going it into Lubellion by pitching Birthmare, and you get to reborn the Sword Knight. And occasionally you go into Albion into Mirror Jade, but you try to avoid doing that if possible. And Rinbrum also comes up as well by being sent off of the Mirror Jade. These were perfect. I never would play any less or more branded cards in the extra deck because, again, the extra deck is very, very tight, so you can't really afford to play any more. And at the same time, you can't really afford to play any less, because even with shufflers, you don't want to have to be reliant on shufflers to have a grind game. So 40 card main deck, 15 card extra deck of course, and onto the side deck, we play 3 Phantasme. I love this card. I've been playing this card in like every event this year. I think it's really strong because you get to just hand fix against something like Unchained. You can just draw into your ways to out anti-spell. Because one of the main ways that you lose to Unchained is Floodgates, because Floodgates are fun and interactive. So you want to draw into ways to deal with anti-spell. You already have Destruction, but you want more ways to deal with it. Mistaken Arrest is also pretty popular, but you care a lot less about Mistaken Arrest than you do anti-spell, because you can just still draw free with Fountain underneath Mistaken Arrest. Against decks like Plants and Salamangreat, you can also draw a bunch of cards with this. Against Plants, you can actually draw 4. Of course, you have to put back 3, but that means you get to hand fix super hard, which makes your deck a lot better into certain decks' endboards. And then I also play 3 copies of Thrust. I don't main Thrust because there's no good normal chap I want to main deck. I didn't want to have to try and find space to main the Karma Cannon, because playing 3 talents in the main is just better, I feel like. And then for our Thrust targets, we already have Branded Fusion and talents in the main deck, and alongside those we also side in Evenly, Herald of the Abyss, and Metaverse, which is pretty much just for Floo, because we can set Metaverse or Thrust, and then we can either Metaverse into Fountain or into Zombie World. And I also play the Banshee, so that against Floowandereeze I can go Branded Fusion into Lubellion with Albaz and this if I don't get shifted, and then that gives me access into Zombie World. So this is like 3 cards which are just for Floo, but Floo is definitely popular enough and can be tricky enough of a matchup to definitely warrant playing 3 cards just for one matchup. Herald of the Abyss is just for Purely pretty much. Even is also for Purely, but it's also for decks which do go wide. Having the option to thrust it against Floo is also pretty cool. And then the 15th card in the side deck is 1 copy of Moonin for the end of match time procedure. And yeah, this has been my Chimera Runick branded deck list featuring Ishizu cards and stuff. It is the definition of mid-range. If you enjoy kind of controlling the game, I think you would really enjoy this deck. It's a lot of fun. I've had so much fun playing this deck, especially because people had no idea what was going on. Because even the people who were aware of this deck didn't know what the deck looked like, which was definitely a big benefit of keeping it secret. Shout out to Tier 0 Games, use code BALANCE5. Shout out to Jamie and Connor, who I travelled and stayed with for the event. Shout out to Andre for doing so well, going 9-0 day 1 with branded Chimera. And to Gabe, who made top 8, and to everyone that I saw. I had some very nice meals with people over the weekend. It was really good. Despite not doing well at Dortmund itself, I had a very good time. Thank you all for watching, have a perfectly balanced rest of your day, and adios.